and mystical, and so speed was, whereas things slowed down and then they've sped back up, and then now they're, and the metronome was invented when Beethoven was well into his composing career, and when he was gifted a metronome, he began to put specific metronomic markings. But
Wow. I mean,
problem
that's
is,
that's an important piece of history in
Mhm.
Beethoven, but I doubt many people know anything about that in the general sense of
well,
things. You know,
he would say things like, play quickly, but or play slow but with passion, and whatever you say in Italian. And then so there were these markers, but once the metronome, you could put a metronomic marking and say, play, this is the speed.
right.
But a lot of people, because he put things really, really, really fast, that a lot of his metronomic markings at the time were potentially impossible to play by a human being. And, but also keep in mind that part of what's happened is, you probably know this too, there's been an arm race in musicianships. Like if you took the Columbus Symphony Orchestra and plopped it in Beethoven's time, they would think they were mutants, because musicians are much better now than they were before as a group, because we have conservatories and we have technique. And just like athletes are so much better than they were 100 years ago, like the Olympics, you take your average Olympiad and slap him in, 1920, he's going to, people are going to freak out. All that's happened. So, and it's had an interesting effect.
Well, it makes me think, and I don't know if I'm coming through on this microphone, but
Yeah.
it makes
Seem to
me.
be. Seem to be. I
I
can hear
don't think
you.
it really matters too much sometimes, but it makes me think that we have somehow distorted these things into our own way. So we make it iatrogenic. Maybe we created this thing into a way. We take a piece of music from some historic person. All the filters of the training, the things that you said, all of that experience and so forth. We come out with something different. I mean, I would wonder if you want to hear how it sounded in Beethoven's time. If that were a way,
Badly.
there was just no. But that's what you're saying.
Yeah, there was a lot of people couldn't play it and messed it up quite a bit, probably. I mean, not that there weren't great players, but people don't realize that string quartets, especially before people could buy albums, which has actually been fairly recently, where you couldn't have a recording of something, you had the sheet music.
Right,
And so string
right.
quartets were sheet music for where you could get family and friends together and they could play a piece of music. And at one point there was like 50,000 string quartets written in a period of time, because there was money you made in it.
Right,
So there were all these people doing it. So a lot of those were made for regular folk. But Beethoven, that's not how he operated, and he often pushed the boundaries further and further and further, and so it became. And I'm reading one of the books I'm reading is about the Takas Quartet. I can never pronounce their name, and it's about their touring and recording the 5 quartets. And the lead violinist is always talking about how horribly difficult they are to play, and how they're not,
Right.
they're often like okay, do we do this? How do we do this? Do we play it fast or slower? He's looking at recordings. Well, this
Oh.
quartet recorded the fastest in recording history that we know of. These guys did the slowest. Okay, we're in the middle. Is that okay? And so there's all these decisions they make in the process.
Yeah, that's a fascinating kind of notion, because I think that
Actually, it's
we
not.
just assume. Well, it is to a certain extent that we're not knowledgeable about it, because I mean, it's ubiquitous too, because you listen to the radio, that song at a certain time. I know for sure in my listening experience that something was sped up to get more commercials in an hour on the radio station. So you heard this song and it just buzzed through, and and you think, well, something's not. So there's just been all these artifacts that in terms of melody. But what you
Yeah,
said,
when Sonny and Cher become punk, that's when you realize, wait a minute. I got
No
you, babe.
kidding.
I got you, babe.
well, I got you, babe. I don't know. And by the way, let's try not to sing on the show anytime.
It's
Forever.
not. Yeah, it's not a good.
That's not where we're trying to go.
But you're what you're talking about is an interesting philosophical thing because
we're trying to create art but we don't.
what's wabi? It's was it
in a way.
wabi sabi? What is the term? That there is a lot of postmodern theorists would say that it's in the mistakes that things come into being. So that an object like a piece of music is inexhaustible in some ways because it can be played so differently, and often the quote mistakes open up a part of the song or the composition that the composer didn't even know was there. Right?
Right.
There's that famous quote from Bob Dylan, something to the effect that once it enters somebody's ear, it's no longer my song, it's theirs.
Right.
So I can't tell them what it means. And so there is this, there's something about it being grasped by the observer that suddenly, makes it, it's that tension between the continuous and the discrete. If it is a thing unto itself, then it has to be played a certain way. Or if it's a continuous thing, culture, the listener, there are all these external factors and internal factors in terms of the folks that are playing it as well that create something new each time, right? That's where jazz comes in. My Derek Bailey's famous saying is, "You should only listen to a jazz record once and then throw it away."
Okay. All right, 1195, right out the window there. Well, I think it's fascinating idea. So many things come to mind about this. There's an artist that paint, and at the end of the painting, they destroy it, or they create a piece of pottery or some art, and then it's only lasts. What was the guy that? Was he stapling banana peels or something?
A banana. He taped the banana to the
Yeah, I guess that's something. But the discrete to the continuous. But there's some threads that just continue to go through our history of art and music and those kind of things that try to stay constant in some way, or at least moving forward. It doesn't radically change, so it keeps the essence of what the artist was trying to put forward.
Yeah, if something were completely continuous, and there are works of art, and there are artists, particularly avant-garde artists, who might attempt to create something that is completely continuous. You could argue that free jazz, which is just completely spontaneous and made up in the moment, is an attempt at but even there, the performers, and there's some research on this by Eric Jost. He was using Ornette Coleman as an example, but if you listen to enough free jazz artists, they have certain licks or motifs or ways of expressing themselves that occur continuously. They have an idiom in which they express themselves from, and all musicians do.
Right.
So just like you can tell certain guitarists, certain whatever, there is a discrete element that pops up over and over again, right? So.
Yeah, it's true. Like the instrument has a range, right? Whatever instrument you're playing, for example, has a range, and you're welcome to do everything.
It doesn't have a range.
Yeah, that's that one note that you hit every time.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say was that you do have some boundaries there from the instrument itself, and then the collection of instruments in the jazz quartet or something like that. So. Yeah, you can do everything you want to within that range. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and notice, like, when you talk about range, for instance, because this is what, particularly in jazz, like someone with Coltrane, he began playing within the idiom. He played within the range that most people found acceptable. But as he began to move later in the later periods of his life, he began to use multiphonics and overblowing and things like this that generated noise from the instrument that people found really difficult to assimilate, right?
Right. But he was just expressing the next level, right?
He was attempting to find some way to continue to grow, and so he those boundaries. And I think probably that's the same with every instrument, right? Like I know bass is your thing, right? So
yeah.
I mean, the history of bass playing.
It gets to the granular side of things because it's the instrument. And first of all, how old is the instrument? You think of Stradivarius violin, or you think of a '62 Fender bass, but but ranging it down to where I'm at. But yeah, so it starts at some point, but then it just blossoms out in that, and you can figure out what you can do, and at some point, when you've done what you want, then the next level may be, let's see how we can experiment and build something different, or make a note that a sound no one's ever heard in an experimental way.
Yeah, there's bands like Parliament Funkadelic. I think they would have 6 bass players on stage at one time.
Yeah, that's not right. That is not.
And or
don't put drummers in that way. By the way, have I ever known a drummer that can keep time? I will talk about that later. I don't think so, but
well, it's so when you say that, what I was thinking about just the history of the bass. Like if you think of like in often what happens is that an instrument like the drums or the bass, right, they're often relegated to this rhythmic status.
That's right.
And so the lead instrument and the vocal, they have they're sort of the underpinning for those two things, right? But then it usually, as you move forward, every instrument starts to have its own place and increase its level of expressivity. So where suddenly, you have where the bass is the lead instrument.
You got the symphony there, just about. Everybody gets their.
Everybody. In fact, there's I don't know if you heard of it. There's a
except lead guitars. We don't want to hear from those guys.
Yeah,
just saying,
I was
my bias coming out, but yeah.
There's this Buckethead track I was listening to yesterday, and it's got like a 17-minute solo. And I mean, it's interesting because he's good enough to make that interesting. But I'm thinking, and you could argue that every Buckethead song is just really a solo, because
right.
But
yeah, but there's also some consistency that needs to be there. I mean, if I want to purchase music that I've heard, I want it to sound like that. And so if everything's improvisation and you're just kind of going every time you play that song, it's different. Well, there's both sides of that coin, I would think.
Well, this goes back to this is a psychological principle, like we talked before about that 5-factor personality thing, and that.
Oh yeah, we need to talk more about that.
Openness to experience. Folks who are high on that are going to want music that sounds different.
Right.
So,
or at least they're open to it when it happens, right?
Yep.
I mean, they appreciate it at some level.
So if you're really into things like free jazz and noise and things like that, you're often searching for new sounds, right? So like, and because I'm not a musician, and because my conception of music is, at least initially, it's a little different now, but it was basically just the sensuous. What does it impact me? When I would listen to, say, something, let's say Beethoven as an example, I would often hear certain moments that really sounded cool within the composition. Well, that's a cool part right there. I can't wait till this comes back up. Oh, there it is again. Or it only happens once. Why didn't he just do more of that, right? What was that?
Right.
And when I initially started going to the symphony, my favorite part of the symphony is when they tune up at the beginning.
And
okay, it was all
right.
down
now,
here from there.
You've just gone off track here.
No, it's true.
I'm going to have to. You could save a lot of money if you just got a refund right after that. Maybe, but explain, please.
Well,
I'm not sure what the.
Because
happened.
I my initial entry into classical music was the avant-garde. There's this guy by the name of Enos Xenakis, and he's a post-serialist, and serialism was where instead of like coming up with a melody or a melodic line and then a second melody to contrast, like in a sonata form,
then a chorus and other things. Yeah, sure.
You literally generate an algorithm or math, and you let it run, and so you see where the algorithm goes, and you can make it for each discrete instrument or the symphony as a block.
Yeah,
and so it creates what sounds like god-awful noise. It really does. And Xenakis would then come in and prune and sort of, he's an architect, so he often generated these architectural scores. They could be 3D. They could be, and I think they were 3D. I've got a book where it shows pictures of the scores, and I'm pretty sure. And so, or it wouldn't have any musical notations. It would have these notations. I don't think he did that.
I'm picturing like a computer graph where boxes you go line down to this and that, and it's sort of graphic in that way.
And so it creates this sound world that you step into, and it's initially very alien, and it has an almost impossible complexity. It's a harsh, complex environment to try to live in, but there's something cool about it. So when people are tuning up at the beginning of the symphony, you have suddenly all these instruments with all these different timbres, and they're all going in different directions. It's like this. It's like looking at a musical equivalent of the Grand Canyon or an explosion. And so you're sort of lost in that moment initially, like just sort of taken aback by the sudden, by being immersed in this sound world where all these things are going on.
Right.
So that would be.
And you have to track it too, because in some ways, you're looking for that thing that you want to hear again. Like you said a minute ago, wow, that was very cool right there. So that's it. No, we're not going there anymore. So I don't know. You have to embrace. Almost sounds like music confusion. I mean, everything is kind of coming at you at once. And what are you supposed to do? You supposed to sort that out, or you just kind of enjoy it as a whole? Because people love the verse, but let's get to the chorus or the hook and those kind of things when you're talking about popular music.
There's a whole branch of psychology called psychoacoustics, and so they try to get a sense of, first off, how people experience music,
right.
And that certain people experience it differently. They have a listener profile, so there are things that they focus on. They may focus on the lyrics, they may focus on the melody, they may focus on the beat. They may focus on timbre, vocal timbre, or instrumental timbre. Like I had a friend who was saying the other day that they didn't like classical music because violins were too pitchy, right? And it makes sense because there is something careening and almost, especially a violin can be screechy.
I think a violin can be used to just decimate your hearing at some point, because it could do such a high screech on those things that it's unbearable for a lot of folks. So yeah, it can be that way.
But
mostly not, but yeah.
So folks would, if your listener profile could be, and it's usually a mixture of these things, but you'll talk to folks and they'll often say, well, it's the beat that's important to me, or I'm not a lyric person, I don't care about lyrics, so all those, if each of us have a different profile, then we may look for different things, we may experience different things. One person's screechy, assaultive violin is, wow, that is an interesting timbre. I've never heard anything like that before, or, there's something.
We all have rules about that. I think it is sort of built in maybe in some way that I know when I listen to a flute, for example, just pick that instrument out, but there's something that needs to be kind of soft and nice, but there's also some really harsh things that come out of the flute.
Tull.
I mean, come on, Jethro Tull is a perfect example with it. But maybe we all have each of us have our own rules. Maybe whether we are aware of them or not, but what we like.
We have a map, and that's where the psychology comes into it, because just like the 5-factor personality, we don't experience our world around us directly. It's filtered through us. So we carry with us a map, or a cookie cutter, if you like, that cuts the world into the pieces that we then consume and we're able to do something with, but we don't receive it directly.
No.
So there's always a filter. So if you're in a relationship with somebody or you're listening to a song, you have and when we talked before here about this concept of internal working models and cognitive behavioral therapy, they're often referred to as schemas. There are all these sort of hidden maps that we're unaware of, and when people come to therapy, it's a little like sometimes they are and typically if we have a map that we operate from, at some point in our life it was very successful. It was useful and helpful.
Right.
But
it may not be now.
Right, won't be. Right. So if you're a little kid and you grew up with alcoholic parents that were all over the place, and so you learned very quickly that if you made as little noise as possible and tried to make yourself as small as possible, then you could get through this with the hope that at some point, once the cacophony slows down or they're sober for a moment, they can attend to you. But what you've learned is I need to be quiet and small.
Right.
Then you move out into the world and you start to have relationship with people. Being quiet and small will get you ignored, or people will miss their own maps. Will confuse that with, well, you really don't care for them. Like I've worked with several folks. One person I worked with quite a while back, who would always have these relationships where he would have this girl that he liked, but he would never tell them directly. and they would eventually find someone else, and he would be heartbroken, right? They would happen over and over again, and he would send out these sort of subtle messages and all these sorts of things, but it always ended in heartbreak for him, and trying to get him to understand, well, the person that got the girl in the end actually tried, and you thought you were, but you didn't. Right?
Yeah, here's a reality check
Yeah.
for you.
And it was easy for this person, also because of their map, to say, because as a child, when they grew up with alcoholic parents, they internalized that, and they thought, well, my parents to some degree drink because I suck, or somehow I'm responsible, or I'm a bad person, that's why these things keep happening.
Right.
And so they would end these relationships. Part of their internal working model is, well, I suck, that's why I'm never going to find someone because I'm ugly or I'm whatever. And actually, no, it's going to be really hard for you to find somebody when you're hidden under a rock, right?
Right.
They don't see you. They can't.
No, they misassign that information. So, wow, those are kind of interesting notions. I'm glad you brought us back to psychology just a little bit, and it was a nice weave you just did. And I don't want to accuse you of weaving. That sounds
I'm more of
like
a dodge. I'm more of a dodger. But that's what makes...
We're getting to it now. Finally, about time.
That's what makes music so important, I think, because it is ultimately, whether it is a song we listen to or the person that we're talking to across from breakfast, there is a way in which we engage, and we have there's a co-created moment that in a sense we're all in string quartets or symphonies, right? There's a complexity in which we're involved, and we bring with us our own score. And so being able to think about music that way, or to be able to think about relationships that way, is just a helpful metaphor, right? So it's, you know.
Right. Whatever kind of helps you understand your situation better and the workings of yourself, and that filter that you said that we all have as the world kind of comes at us when we're filtering that. It's really interesting. There's been so many things that have that happened in this last week. So I thought about what we would talk about today in our episodes.
One thing I thought we'd talk about.
Hold on, wait! Don't point the finger like that. Okay. What happened?
Because I think part of what we should talk about too, just real quick, because you got some things in mind, and that's cool.
I know very few, but go ahead.
Because we should sort of have a post-Thanksgiving family encounter episode. We're going to talk a little bit about...
I think we set that up last time a little. At least I tried to do. I was asking you to take pictures or get the video for it because we wanted to dissect that and analyze it. But we'll take your version. We may have to get some other people in here to hear their versions out of your family, what happened. But we'll start with yours. So I don't know, but the idea of what happens after Thanksgiving, in just some ways, the first thing that pops in my head is there's a relief that this holiday, these expectations.
Lots of turkey.
Okay, we got some food, and now we can relax. So I'm hoping that will be true for a lot of people, but you never know. So post Thanksgiving.
Well, so remember we talked last time, and I've seen a lot of stuff on this, like how to avoid arguments during your holiday break with relatives.
And by the way, the uncle is the main target of this, by the way. Now, how did the uncle get to be? We don't have an aunt.
I'm the uncle in this equation. Really, let's be honest. I am an uncle.
I knew it was coming.
I am an uncle, so that is a
it's unfair to uncles across the board that they're the ones every time that get referred to during this Thanksgiving. You're going to dinner and there's your uncle at the table. Come on.
Well, see, I think the uncle is close enough, but also far enough away to generate tension, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because some uncles, there's often this family system that exists fairly autonomous throughout the year, and then suddenly the uncle steps into it briefly, generates some dissonance, and often the uncle may not speak the same language that the family does, so as you're sitting around the table, the uncle doesn't operate from the same social cues or the same unwritten laws and rules that the rest of the family do, and that at least on some level I think has something to do with it. Like I'm aware that we usually have, we didn't do this time because we actually had separate Thanksgiving. We'll meet together in Christmas, but
Okay, we'll go back to that because I find that the interesting piece of this equation as we go into this in depth a little bit. By the way, one more note about the uncle being there. It's really like you read the articles about this same topic, or you see the videos on YouTube and all the other places, and what you really need to do is, like, it says uncle, but insert your family member here. You know, one of those kind of maps that you could do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be him. But okay, go.
well, just so like for instance, you know,
You and the two separate
well,
Thanksgiving dinners alarm me a little bit, but not much because I know a little bit you shared already.
well,
So I understand
there have been some tensions. You know, I think our current political climate has created a level of division that makes it sometimes difficult.
Yes.
And I think that's at least partly at play here. However, you know, we were going to try to have a Thanksgiving dinner together on this coming Sunday, but it just didn't make sense for.
Oh, that's right before you go back to work.
Yeah, it
you
just
need
didn't
that
make sense.
day. Yeah. Right.
So we just sort of, but there are different families, you know, that, and I don't actually. There is probably something here in that, you know, that there was some tension a month or two ago, but we will gather on Christmas, I assume, so we'll see what happens then.
Right.
But I think that if we sort of think about this way, there's lots of articles about how to navigate potential family tension on the
Right.
Thanksgiving holiday. But we read a lot of those. We talk on the way up here. I was listening to a podcast about how we can manage conflict and how to be. We've talked in here about intentional in managing conflict. We've talked about that, right?
Oh,
So
yeah, we have.
how to be able to, you know, how to mentalize, how to be able to generate a response instead of a simple reaction. We talked about that here too.
No, and by the way, I'll just interject this: that last time we talked, and this is a memorable moment in our episode, but you basically said treat that person as an individual and ask them how they're doing, or how's their dog, or what those kind of issues, which I think all of a sudden smooths things out to give you an opportunity to talk, and I really like that. So I don't want to miss that.
And so, those are all can be helpful because I think we sort of talked about this last time that I think sometimes someone will bring tension into the family because, you know, we ask for love in the most unloving ways.
Right.
Right.
Say that again.
We ask for love in the most unloving ways, right? So that's
Thank you.
Yeah, that is.
I need to hear it.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm sorry. I don't know about
That's
the
going to be on my
listeners,
tombstone.
and as a few other things. I'm gonna put some things on that tombstone. Just wait.
It's not
all right, there we go.
So what I thought is, how do we recover, or what do we need to do post Thanksgiving meal, right? Especially since because we're about to. There's a double whammy here because Christmas is right around the corner.
Oh, you're about to get it again. Yeah, same
There's
thing.
always
more so.
And remember that part of our goal is not to stop suffering, but to get better at it. So suffering is the way wisdom and truth find its way. And so if it was a rough road, or if it wasn't, what do you learn from that? So when Christmas comes around, you can be better. And also, I think maybe even more importantly too, how do you recover? Because oftentimes I think we are left from these situations feeling bruised, right? And if we've talked before about folks we have two sort of ways you can deal with this. You can internalize it or externalize it. And externalizing to some degrees is at least easier in the sense that it doesn't leave you as bruised because they suck, right?
Right. You're
my
pointing the finger out.
racist, ignorant,
got
fascists.
That's the go-to. That's the first. Seems to
and
be.
Sometimes it's true, but yeah, But all this, But let's stick with externalization for a second, because if you think about this, now, a concept like fascism is helpful in the sense that it labels something. But every labeling is a form of taxidermy. It has to kill and stuff and mount the thing that you're saying, right?
Oh, interesting.
So even that word, even if, and right now there's a rise in this Christofascism, for instance, this notion that that we need to fall back on biblical principles, and that's what the country needs. And there are a lot of folks who believe that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And for some
That
folks,
haven't read the Bible, by the way,
yeah.
but yeah. Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
it's
Sorry about
often
that.
interesting what parts of the Bible they
Apologize.
choose,
And,
because that's always kind of interesting. But and there was actually Sam Harris interviewed a Christian nationalist, Doug Wilson, I think is his name.
okay.
You ever get a chance? It's something to because Harris doesn't argue with him. He's not a debate. He just
No.
wants he literally says, I just want you to help me to understand this. And so the guy talks through. And Doug Wilson, if you've ever seen him, he was sort of made semi-famous. There was even a documentary where he and Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah,
did
that's
this.
right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And he and Christopher Hitchens were really good friends. Like
Sure.
Hitchens really liked him, and he really liked Hitchens.
Right.
So Wilson is actually he's self-effacing and he's funny, and he's, as he's talking about this, but from my perspective, as he's talking, it's a little chilling, because what he's asking for seems to be the opposite of what, the Enlightenment ideals that sort of spawned our country, that by its very nature, a democracy needs to be able to, and so one part of what Harris sort of asked about, how are you going to hold on to some of our democratic principles? And he gives some answers about that, what would that look like,
Great book out right now called I think it's by a guy named Fugelsang. He wrote a new book just came out, Church and Hate. And I've read some excerpts out of it, and it basically he's talking about we've moved away from the teachings of Jesus into all of this other stuff from the pick and choose from the Bible, but we seem to be missing one of the core ingredients, and that's his thesis out of that book. And so I just want to throw that out there.
But
as well.
notice how, just from a theological perspective, you can easily decontextualize, isolate, and both sides could accuse the other of this in a way that could create a narrative that would support the thing that is important to you. Was it Jesus said that I come with a sword? I don't know the full line. I come with a sword.
Yep.
So you could, you could read this different ways, and because the Bible is actually not a book; it's a library. It's a collection of different books.
Yeah.
And so to generate a cohesive narrative to contain them all requires a theological leap. You have to have a theology to do that.
Right.
And therein becomes something problematic because theology is different. And I think there's
and the contradictions that you'll find. So, it makes it very difficult.
And there's an astronomical number. It's either 5,000 or 50,000 different denominations, Christian denominations. So there's that's a little like we were talking before, that discrete and the continuous. And when it comes to music,
right,
there are people playing this quartet very differently.
nice analogy. Way to pull that back. Yeah.
Yeah, but I actually
points. You get 2 points for bringing
that's being obsessive. But so if you think about this, then if when we externalize, which is these are sort of basic. If there are two basic ways to be able to do something with the feelings you have, and if the first one is to externalize, then for you suddenly feel better, at least, because they're the ones who suck, you don't.
Right.
All this emotional intensity that's suddenly inside you can be directed outward.
And it doesn't seem that it really helps. I mean, maybe in the moment you feel a little bit of power over something or over someone, but man, it doesn't seem to stick. It just
that's why I think, especially with externalization, our goal would be, at least metaphorically, to ask a Nazi over for dinner.
Okay.
And your goal is, how can you be in the presence of somebody whose worldview appears so blatantly repugnant? And how can you be in their presence in such a way, and the opposite of externalization with mentalization, how can you get some sense of why they're saying or doing what they're doing?
Right.
Doesn't mean you need to believe it, but this notion that somehow you should punch a Nazi in the face. Actually, that's the most anti-American thing you can do, because if we are truly a bastion of democracy, Nazis should have a place to be able to be Nazis as long as they're not messing with anybody else. You can
Right.
Nazi all you want,
Yeah.
as long as you're not messing with anybody else.
There you go.
The Klan can meet every day and play ping pong if that's what they want to do.
Right.
As long as they're not burning crosses in people's yards, unless it's a consenting person who really wants a cross burnt in their yard. Go ahead, man. You guys do that. It's beautiful.
Never happened, but go ahead.
yeah, maybe not. But
No, I see where you're going. Yeah.
but the goal would be, so how do you invite the Nazi in for dinner and lean in and get a sense of, and so the externalization doesn't happen. And that's where asking the uncle, how's your dog? But the next step would be with someone with ideology, just to get a sense of, well, help me to understand why this is important to you.
Right.
What does this mean to you? And so if somebody starts telling you, and we'll use the Nazis as an example, let's assume they say something to the effect that the world is getting worse and worse, and because we've neglected natural racial purity, we're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
If we are not maintaining our racial, he may say, and that's for everybody. I think the Spanish should stay Spanish, and African Americans should stay African Americans, and all that sort of stuff. So that's the only way we're going to be able to keep this world from falling apart. At the core of that is fear, right? We talked before about primary and secondary emotions, and the secondary emotions of hate, of envy, of disgust. There's a primary emotion that's beneath all of that, and that is fear. And there is a place that you could begin to mentalize and at least humanize the individual in a certain way that you might be able to navigate your time with them differently. Mm-hmm. So you don't step away from the conversation with hate, but you might step away with sympathy, even sorrow, right? Mm-hmm. You could say, I really feel bad that this person is trapped in this way of thinking about the world in such a way that, and the same with, right? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupt that train of thought as I usually do, but it makes me think that we see the extremes of the other side that we would invite to dinner. Well, that's what's projected at us, constantly. But those are only the sensational ones. They make the headlines. Everybody else that may believe something that may be a huge population of people, but we don't get that opportunity, because it seems like we form these opinions and then react emotionally based on a little bit of information and not a bigger picture. So that I see that as a particular problem. But like you said, and you said this in different ways. You had lunch with people who you totally disagree with politically in other ways, and I think that maybe all of us need to take a little step toward someone maybe in our community before you see
that
somebody
uncle
out there that's
right.
Yeah.
A holiday meal with somebody who is very different from you gives you a chance to be able to practice love in a way that you couldn't otherwise. It doesn't mean that and it takes us back. If you can see them a little clearer, if you step away from that encounter in a place of hatred for them, or just rage that they exist, then you've been diminished. Christopher Bolus calls this a fascist state of mind, that you are dwelling in a level of certainty and a loss of humility that is detrimental to you. The very thing that you dislike them for, you've suddenly become that yourself, right?
Right. And there's such a wonderful feeling, too, that comes along with that understanding, and that, being in that position where you're about to accept some new information, and you're not going to belittle this person. You're just going to kind of get to know what they're behind some of their thinking and how they react. But there's something empowering about that particular stance. I like that idea, because otherwise you both walk away kind of shaking your fist at the other.
And so there's the potential for a holiday encounter. If it went well, you still may be holding in your mind, buzzing like a bee or two in your head, some things you wish you had said, or some moments when you really just, you're playing over in your head, man, I can't believe he said that. Why would he believe something so
Emotional
stupid?
Reaction immediately, it just overwhelms you.
Well, my man Bion talks about, he wants to come up with a term for this. He calls it beta elements. They're unprocessed emotional events that we often carry with us, and they sort of find their way, and they can be They can be ruminative loops. They can become somatic experiences. They're often like you just sort of replay over your head in
Oh,
your head. I wish I could go back to that conversation and tell him this,
oh
right?
my
Whatever the case may be.
goodness! I mean, this happens a million times, right? For everybody, probably.
And that's where this notion of again inviting a Nazi for dinner. How do you find some way to find the humanity? Because one way to get out of these ruminative loops is to see the person that you're having this argument, virtual or otherwise, in your head as having a heartbeat. So what is it? Even though you may not like their existential solution for living, it may be repugnant to you, it's still an attempt at a solution by a fellow human being, right? And so there's a possibility. And it gives you a chance, too, to be able to think, okay, because part of our division, I think, in politics right now is because there's not a cross communication, there is wisdom to be had on all sides. Now, that's sort of, there's a wisdom from a racist. Well, the catch is, even a Nazi is not only a Nazi. There are other things too. They may be a father, they may be a mother, they may be all these other things. And so part of what happens when we move into what Bolus calls this fascist state of mind, we lose someone's complexity in such a way that we can no longer hold them, right?
Right, and we lose some of our own too because
there you go,
we just gave ourselves, a setback from where we were actually going and try to understand somebody else, and then the emotions in that reaction start. So it sounds like a little work for us to be at that level, to be able to accept the Nazi for dinner.
Well, I think it can make you, talking with someone, it can help clarify your views in a way that you might be able to articulate them better, at least to yourself. So an example, like in my family, on my sister's side, they're much more conservative, and my brother-in-law is very conservative. And we've had conversations where we don't talk politics much anymore, but there was a time when we did a lot. And he was went through a period where he really was sort of anti-evolution, and I'm sure he probably still feels that way, but there was this notion, and I could tell that he wanted me to hear he wanted me to think similar in some ways, and so he was trying to give me this information,
Right.
and that, sort of to cure me of my way of thinking about these things.
There you
right?
go.
And our conversations would often be just sort of like, him stating a fact and me stating a fact and nothing on the in-between. And whereas it might have been more important, right, if I could rewind it, and I would often walk away from that, I hate to say it, but sometimes with a smug sense of superiority, right?
Got him. Yeah,
yeah,
you nailed that one.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, that collapses my complexity because, for one thing, and this is more philosophical than otherwise, and since we're talking about this, but science doesn't work in certainties. So a scientific theory like evolution, even though it's very important, probably the most important biological theory. It's a unifying theory in biology. Unifies the field of biology with lots of other theories, psychology, and other things like this. It's
Physics,
very important.
yeah.
All these things, you're right. And so, but it doesn't work in certainty. Science always opens up the possibility, even the hope that something better will come along, right? That's why there's always progress to be made.
Right.
The theoretical model it can collapse, it can be tweaked. So my smugness doesn't take into account, it's like I suddenly become religious about this thing in a way that is non-scientific, right?
Right.
Like
right.
you can't believe this, you can hold it in your mind because right now it's the best we've got. But, so in a very way, I would walk away from the very thing I would accuse him of, I would be doing secretly myself.
Yeah,
right? So,
that's no good for the situation here. It almost seems like that's a blueprint.
I'm still smarter than he is.
Yeah, well, debatable. All right, well, we'll get that. We don't know him yet. We got to bring him in. All right, but here's the thing. It just seems to me that we lose, as you said in that, we lose ourselves in that position, but also it's like a template that if you have that from a religious point of view, whatever that take is, And then politics comes along, and now you apply that same set of that schemata, if you will, and those kind of things to the next level. So you still operating on a, a not very open and understanding way, because you've adapted a model, and that's how you're going to apply religion, now politics, and whatever else is after that.
And you said that my thought went to this metaphor, fascist march, non-fascist dance. And so part of this is, and so if you can be aware of how the person across from you is equal in the co-creation of this moment, right? So if I'm working with someone who is floridly psychotic, and they're saying things that are just not true, that there are giant mosquitoes that want to suck out their brain. That's an example from Bert Karen, one of the books he wrote. And it doesn't mean I have to believe in the giant mosquitoes, but I can see my place in this story in a way that allows me to be present for the person across from me and see how we can make this, we can articulate it and maybe do something with it together. So there's the possibility for real communication, even with someone who is cut off from the world in all sorts of ways.
Right.
There's still and in that instance, it could be, a simple statement it sounds like you're really, really afraid.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so suddenly, and what'll often happen when someone's primary emotion is reflected back, or contained and then reflected back, and that's really important in terms of technique, right? Because
that's therapy.
If you simply say, "Sounds like you're really afraid," that's not helpful, right? But if you can contain the emotion and
say...
No
one's ever said that, but I like it. It might be a first. We got it here. We captured it.
I've done some supervision with some folks where I'm like, holy cats.
Holy.
Have you spoken to another human being in your life?
I got this therapy club over here I'm going to hit you in the head with. So there we go.
If you are able to contain it and say, man, it really sounds like that this is scary.
Right.
This is scary. It sounds like you're terrified, man. This is
and
horrible.
Genuineness comes in.
And so suddenly you've contained it in a way that suddenly the need for a psychotic narrative can diminish, and they can simply start talking about how scared they are. And then you suddenly realize that what they're really trying to articulate in their own sort of way is that the jumble of feelings and emotion in their heads, 1 minute they were okay, and now suddenly they can't think straight, and it's as if something has come along and has taken away from them something important to them, right? That's taken their peace. And so they come up with a giant mosquito that flies up and does it, right?
Right.
So you can see it suddenly makes sense that they're trying to generate a narrative to explain to you. They can't say, man, this psychotic stuff really sucks. I'm completely overwhelmed and terrified, and I'm helpless.
Well, if you could do that,
they wouldn't be psychotic.
No, right.
but that's an example of of how that finds its way in therapy. Something that just to sort of because the second category is the one I think is often talked about least, and that's the internalization part, because you can externalize, and that's sort of a fascist state of mind.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that recapitulation of that theme back to us right here. I love it.
But there's another form of fascism, and that's whereas instead of you are up here and you suddenly split and see the other person is sucking, you split the other way and you see yourself as sucking, and so you walk away from that encounter bruised, feeling betrayed because you deserve it. When you feel lonely and isolated and feel that you deserve that isolation because there's something wrong with you, that you walk away from these family encounters and say, I'm never going to have the family that I really want and need, and I'm always going to be alone. And you could suddenly, suddenly there's this other form of certainty that you can be trapped in.
Yeah.
And I think that's often the part that people don't often talk about, that they step away bruised and battered in a way that, and they sort of, and then they walk away and keep walking on a sprained ankle or broken leg, and they never really attend to the wound or to the thing that is hurting them. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely makes sense. And one way I think about that is that we don't know what outcome that we want. maybe we have something that's not based in reality in that when we're talking to that person and there's a disagreement and we're trying to, kind of overpower with some either fact or other things that you were talking about. But then we take that hit just as well. So I guess my question is, okay, we need a template or at least an outcome strategy at the end of it. What do we want to have accomplished at the end of this? And I would think, well, let's say something about maybe we appreciate each other in some ways, or we disagree, but we get along. I mean, I'm not sure what that outcome is, and people engaging in this process are at that almost a surface level, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Well, so as you're saying that, so right, so I mean, there are some things that could happen during the argument. There could be some way that if you practice that intentionality, you may find yourself a way to reach back across the table, metaphorically or even literally, for a hug, right? So there is a way to reestablish attachment and connection, because I mean, all the way from Gottman and all these other folks, they talk about how powerful relational repair is. In fact, it can be the most powerful thing, that what really generates bonds are the moments when we misstep and we accidentally hurt each other, but then we can find a way to come back together and to be able to reestablish that connection, that is the place where relationships truly grow, right?
Yeah.
That fights are necessary in some way, that they reflect the ways in which that we're trying to grow each other and trying to connect. So I hear what you're saying there. That's important, so sort of to remind folks, and that's cool. I think too that if it's on the drive home, you may have to call said family member.
Right.
You may need to
follow up a little bit there.
Tailor, whether it's a text or otherwise, some way to be able to say, hey, I think that got a little heated. I want you to know that I love you. I don't love you any less.
Man,
right?
I want to live in that world. Can we just get a ticket to wherever that is, because oh, man, we need it so much. I mean, all we've got now in this thing is people are attempting these things, and they're trying, and some people are not trying, and some people use name-calling, for example, when they're in a disagreement. You might get called if you're up in a certain part of our country and you happen to be in a press corps, for example, and you're talking to the president, you might get called a name in those things. I think it was Miss Piggy called on these women, or you're ugly,
quiet
or you're stupid,
Piggy,
or
something
quiet
like
Piggy.
That. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry that came to mind, but we're talking about reasonable, rational kinds of interactions where the purpose of this is to know the person better, feel good yourself, but help others as well. We talked about that, this kind of thing. So if you have an outcome that is a little more positive in how we're going to fit all of this, these disparate things together and come out with a good solution for everyone, that's work in progress. It sounds like we need to move there.
Well, and so if we sort of think about, like, if there has this post-relational conflict, if you're on the drive home after your Thanksgiving meal, if you're sort of going over the things good and bad, and there were these moments of collision, and remember, you could externalize, and suddenly you could make yourself, they're idiots. But if we go back to this notion of the internalized element that we could do, then we have to find a way first, I think, if we follow my man B on there, to digest an emotional event. We have to first be able to put it into words. We have to be able to express it, right? So it could be like to simply say, I feel so disconnected from my family. I feel right now in this moment, I feel disconnected from the world. Right now in this moment, I feel unlovable. I feel like I am fated to never be loved, right? So sometimes being able to put that into words keeps it from being a secret sort of negative fascism that it keeps it from being something that's running negatively in the background. So in the next morning when you wake up and you feel horrible and you just feel this sense of blackness and darkness, right? So you don't, and you'll often ask folks who'll come in and they'll say they're depressed. Well, there's no reason why I'm depressed, right? And often when we start talking, you begin to see there's so many things that they're unaware of. They're unaware of their negative interjects or their negative self-talk. They're unaware of the trauma and the disconnection they've experienced throughout their life. And because they haven't been able to put those things into words, work through them, whatever you want to say, understand the underlying schemas, internal work, whatever you call it. Part of what happens in therapy is to be able to name that. So on the drive home, if you are feeling as if suddenly a hopelessness, a despair that came from probably that encounter,
Yep.
first step, right, is to be able to, again, practice that intentionality. How do you allow yourself to give a name to this? How do you practice some self-care and some self-compassion, right? Those can be really, really important. And my concern is oftentimes folks have these negative encounters at the Thanksgiving table, and they're unaware of how bruised, and they're unaware of how they will carry this encounter with them throughout the rest of their day, even maybe throughout the rest of the year until they're back the next time in Thanksgiving. And it's this negative loop that is diminishing them that they're unaware of, right? So I guess
Right.
part of what I'm saying is, how do we allow ourselves to be intentional in being able to give yourself a place and permission to be able to feel it, to name it, and potentially heal. And ideally, I mean, it'd be cool if you could also generate some wisdom from it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, think about the mentalization that you could do for yourself. You could say, what is it about that encounter that made me feel so bad? Do I often feel this way? In my other relationships, do I often find myself feeling unlovable or unworthy of some sort of connection, love, or attachment? And you could begin that dialogue with yourself in a way that could lead you to be able to untangle the knot, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think it does make sense, and it just seems that we have to do some mentalization regardless, because we already do it. We have William James and the flow of consciousness idea. Well, all of those kind of things
That guy was
begin
a
to
hippie.
happen. Yeah, we're going to talk about him someday. But I would say that. Yeah, it is a self-healing. It's like taking care of yourself after this, but
Permission to it.
permission to do that, and I don't think people give enough permission to themselves to do it, and they haven't explored these issues. It seems like, I mean, I think this is a purpose of what we're trying to do in our conversations here is to give someone just a little step toward figuring some things out that are causing some harm. They realize it's causing some harm. They don't know what to do about it, but the idea is it stops short at that externalization. So I can blame that other guy and point the finger, but I have work to do, and wow, where do I start on that? So what you're saying is we should name it, if that's the first step. Maybe.
And in naming it, you're giving yourself permission to realize that it is the suffering that gives you the opportunity for growth. So whether it is your anger and contempt for your uncle across the dinner table, or it's your secret contempt for yourself, if you can name that, there's the potential for something to happen next. And there is the potential for personal growth. There's a potential to be aware of and do something with that feeling in a way that could be good. And that's kind of what therapy is. Like if somebody comes in and tells me about their uncle, and they're telling me this story about, he's such a chews with his mouth open, and he starts talking about all these racist stuff, and he's such an ignorant idiot and all that sort of stuff. I mean, part of the goal is, okay, let's help this person put this into words, but let's see if it's possible to see if there or me or them or any who's in that story too. So we want to be able to think about what's underneath the story, because oftentimes, let's say in this example, as we start talking about the uncle, we realize that this is someone who came from the same economic background as the uncle, and they have a fear of looking and being like that. And that so much of their life at this point, so much of the money they spend has been an attempt to be able to scrub away the taint of their family history, right? And so they are confronted across the table the very thing that they've been running from all their life. And what if part of the work is to get them to be able to see that and to take a breath and say, wait a minute, And then this would never happen, I know. But then what if suddenly the uncle, who is ignorant and racist and all these things, you also notice that he's really good at woodworking. And that this is somebody who has built these wonderful, these pieces of furniture in his basement, right? And This is someone who, suddenly has, and you find out that that's something that he learned from your grandfather, that this is something that's passed down and it's something you have a secret interest in, or it's something that you suddenly can connect with the uncle with. There's suddenly the possibility for your world to be bigger and you to be bigger, and suffering often is the only way for that potential to happen, right?
Yeah, that's hard for a lot of us to accept, that I've got to do all this work and I've got to kind of go to places I really don't want to go, and if I do it though, there's going to be something better in it for myself and others as well. I really like that idea. I want to drop back for just a minute here, and I'm sorry to bring up this thing, but in a way, the idea that you've been insulted. I kept wondering this week, as if I put myself in the place of the reporter who was called these names, and I was thinking, what would I say? And my first is the externalization. That's where I went mentally. Hey, you, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of work for a lot of people to do around that situation. It's a little out of hand, and there's a power differential that is incredible. And what can you really say and do those things? But the quiet piggy comment is it seems to have some traction with some people, but then it just sort of exposed the people around them, that why didn't they get a little backup from the people and say, hey, wait, that's not cool. At least that, or something. So I wonder if you might have an idea of that dynamic, and what could you do when you're sort of overpowered with someone in authority, and if you say something, you might get kicked out, or you never come back, or it could ruin your career, or there's all of those kind of things play in there. But I just wanted to throw this out and let you kind of respond to it just a little bit, because I felt that hit, and I think a lot of us felt that hit when you begin to think, what if that was me? What if it were me in this? I would tell them off, or I would do these different things, but would you really? And weighing all the circumstances. But what's proper? Is there a proper way to do that with that power differential in that situation? Or is there something that, if you put yourself in the place of that reporter, female reporter, it seems to be most of the time, all the time maybe, I don't know, what options do you really have?
Well,
It's kind of astounding that we got
if
to
we
that
could
point.
think about it from the perspective what we talked about today, I mean, the first goal would be, how does she navigate this in a way that doesn't generate some negative internalizations, that she could suddenly feel a sense of shame and embarrassment that she carries with her, and that she's sort of wounded by, that it could affect her professionalism. It could, so we want to think about that. I mean, that's the first part.
Consequences, yeah.
There are bullies in the world. There are people, and there's a context, and I'm in no way taking Trump's side. That would never happen. Maybe I can think of, maybe there could be some moments.
Yeah.
But
And it fits with what you said earlier. So you have credit for that.
yeah, I've got to understand, because I mean, Trump obviously at that moment felt attacked, right?
Right.
And I think she was bringing up questions related to the old Epstein thing. I think that's the question that she was asking him, and he said, "Quiet, piggy." And I think that he already feels, he feels under attack, and anytime someone resorts to name-calling or bullying in that sense, they're already speaking from a place of impotence, right? I mean, he's in the seat of one of the most powerful positions in the entire planet, and yet he needs to punch down at a reporter. I mean, so
Yep,
that's already telling us something, right?
Yes, it is.
Because he could have been coolly indifferent. He could have acted as if he didn't hear her at all, and as if she meant nothing to him in the world.
Moving on.
He could have, been condescending in his response, but he falls back on almost a reflexive misogyny and probably, I mean, he said this many times before, right? He said that, I think at the Charlie Kirk Memorial thing, he said something like, Charlie was about loving your enemies, and I'm not that. I don't do that. He said something like that. I
Yeah.
want to destroy my enemies,
Right.
and
Right.
which
Right.
again comes from a place of this sort of cumulative trauma of sorts. I'm assuming that that there's this thin-skinned, phallic, narcissistic element that's at play here and plays itself out in lots and lots of ways. That's not really helpful. But
No, but
if you can mentalize him in those ways and say that it doesn't excuse what he said, in fact, it exposes so much. But that moment, he did feel under attack. It didn't just come from anywhere. It didn't. I don't think it came from a place of simple sadism, but I came from a place that, he just doesn't know how not to punt down.
This is an example, and I think it's almost a kind of a growing thing a little bit with this, that there's folks that sort of take to that. But we're really talking, and we talked in here, a lot of people have talked about personality disorders, these long-term sort of approaches to life that negatively impact others in so many ways. And I think we kind of give a pass to that sometimes when people say do those bullying things, and we have to have a better response to it. So,
but
well,
here's the thing, and I know we're at the end, so maybe we could talk more about this next time. But since this happened on a political stage,
yep.
what's playing out is not just a narrative between a thin-skinned president who has probably some strong misogynistic things he needs to work through, and a reporter who is at a very different level, but probably on some level may have been attempting to antagonize him. I don't know. Maybe not at all. Maybe just asking a question. So instead of these two players, it's just on the global stage. You have to think about, what does this mean for the political, for the American conscience, right?
Good
and
question.
So there are lots of people that see him do that and actually enjoy that, because he's no longer just playing political decorum. In those moments, Trump shows up as Trump, and that's what makes it easier for them to vote for him than a false and carefully calculated politician. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So
Sure.
in those moments, for a portion of his base, that's why they voted for him.
Oh yeah, you can tell somebody off and
Yeah.
say it like it is. I've heard that term. All of
So
those kind of things.
our goal would be, how do we learn from this? Because there's something important. Like part of what there are various reasons why the Democrats lost last time, but there was such Harris came across often as very filtered and very non-spontaneous. She wouldn't directly answer certain questions. She would be was trying to calculate as quickly as possible to come. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that.
Most politicians.
But she was sort of trapped in a political speak that Trump, for better or worse, and often better in his instance because he got him elected, is not trapped in. Well, he is not a polished politician. He appears to be, visceral and all these things that certain people, especially, a portion of the folks in the United States who feel like that they're not represented on the political stage.
And now even represented less. As a matter of fact, in some ways it's going to be there.
That it will be the outcome.
But what about a good bully? Is there such a thing? And can we, like somebody says, look, we're going to feed all the children. I don't care what you say. And we're going to educate our entire population. I'm not taking, have we ever seen that guy or person?
Well,
I just wondered if there's an opposite of this.
I mean, I saw this that there were lists of the greatest presidents united in history, and usually FDR is number one, or he's in the top.
Yeah.
And part of what happened in FDR,
and
FDR, came from generational wealth after generational wealth, but he literally said that very same thing. He said, no one's going to starve here. We're going to make sure we're going to create these, and so he created a social, and he literally said that's not, and I think that ultimately that's where, so if there were a good bully, if underneath, because the bully is an externalizer, but maybe to be able to externalize and mentalize in the right sort of way, you can see the problem not as the people around you, but the economic conditions and disparities that continue to create this over and over again. So if we had a bully on the left, they would say something maybe like this: I know lots of folks who support Trump would never, ever support me. They would see me as less than them, or they would see me as the enemy, whatever. But you know what? I'm going to love them too, and I'm going to make sure that they are better off and just as better off as the people who do vote for me. And that's going to be very important to me. Maybe that was what it would look like.
Wow. Okay, Dan for president. After that, I don't know. I don't know where we're going, but
I couldn't be. I couldn't be president of my book club. Okay, let's be honest. It's not a.
I don't know if we're ever going to see Dan in politics, but I like some of the ideas you've thrown out today. Look, let's do a little more internal mentalization. Let's do some stuff and work on ourselves a little bit and be prepared for those moments.
I got to trim this beard because I've been a week off and I haven't done anything with it, so it's like it looks lumpy. I could hide a shiv in here. So if I go to jail, I can.
Possibility, but go ahead. Yeah. So, all right. This has been kind of cool. So, hey, thanks everybody. This is Got Therapy. See you next time.